We'll see about how day 6 goes today. Day number 5 in the books. They had the walkthrough yesterday and now back on the field today, back opened up to reporters, which means our man, Johnny Mac, John McMullen, will be down there today. He is down there, I believe, or maybe on the way down there. I got him in the green room right now. Let's go to our main man, Johnny Mac, John McMullen, joining me right now. Football 24/7 morning edition. J-Mac, how you doing this Thursday morning, brother?
Good morning. Yeah, you're getting me from the car, so hopefully you can hear me.
John, you sound good, brother. It's another day, another dollar for this football team. Day number 6 upcoming, John, and it's Michael Clay Day. They moved Tulo back. You got to fit the special teams coordinator in there every once in a while, Johnny Mac. I don't know if he's every other week or what, but Michael Clay Day, day number 6. What are your first thoughts, Johnny Mac, on it?
Yeah, obviously the third phase doesn't get as much talked about. It's, kind of frustrating from the staff, certainly from Michael's standpoint, but I'm sure, from the football standpoint, because we constantly talk about the depth chart and, particularly a receiver we've talked about a lot. Well, this guy's a better receiver. Why isn't he going to be on the team over a certain other person? And the answer is inevitably special teams, because you got to be able to help there. More interesting stuff than usual with special teams, because it looks like the Eagles are going to piecemeal the return game again. So you're going to have a kickoff returner. You're going to have a different punt returner. There was some thought that maybe Avery Williams would handle both of those jobs, but that hasn't really been obvious. In fact, I've seen him taking one rep as a punt returner, and that was really in a period where Braden Mann was practicing backed up, was trying to pin teams down with punts, so it was more of a coverage drill.
Right.
So he was just there to catch the football. I haven't seen him really in a legitimate rep as a punt returner yet. Still plenty of time, but a little bit surprising. And then, you have the new kickoff rules where the touchback is coming back to the 35, which I think makes it more realistic that teams will not just default to kicking the ball in the end zone. Because
that's big yards, John, starting from the 35. Yeah.
Yeah, that is, and that's one of the reasons they didn't. That was the original rule proposal last year, and they had to move the touchback back to the 30 to get it passed.
Right.
And my prediction at the time was, well, everybody's just gonna. They might do some things early in the season.
Right. You said it's basically going to be the same result.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And they did. They ended up just, all right. We don't love it, but it's easier just to kick the touchback. I think the 35, even though it's only 5 yards, I think that makes a big difference, and it's going to be interesting to see how teams handle it.
Yeah, no doubt about it. I'm curious on that returner spot. John, just a couple questions on that spot at the return position. Is it, I guess this might be a dumb question, but is it almost a guarantee that the person they keep to return kicks and punts would be a receiver? I guess if they keep 6 receivers, does one of those 6 have to either be Anais or Avery Williams or one of those dudes? I mean, I guess you could go outside the box and talk about Cooper DeJean. That's not my favorite thing in the world. Where, or do they keep 5, 6 receivers and then in addition keep Avery Williams on another side? Kind of walk me through that, what that looks like, because I do believe that's where some of the roster construction can get challenging for GMs, and that's where Howie has to kind of make some moves and assess the board properly.
No, it doesn't have to be a receiver. There's a lot. Isaiah Rodgers was one of the 2 main kickoff returners last year, so there are a lot of defensive backs that return kicks around the league. With the Eagles, I mean, Avery Williams is a perfect example. He got drafted out of Boise State as a defensive back. Then he moved to running back, and now the Eagles list him as a wide receiver. He's not really a wide receiver. He's really just a return guy. Now, Nick mentioned maybe some manufactured touch ability, some gadget ability back in the spring. haven't really seen that. They've done more of that with Anais Smith. So he's listed as a wide receiver, but he's not really a wide receiver. So ultimately, you're looking for your best return guys. Right now, I would say Anais Smith is the odds-on favorite to be the punt returner, and Avery Williams is the odds-on favorite to be the kickoff returner. I don't necessarily love that.
Does that mean they keep? Does that mean those two guys would be in the 6 receivers they keep, and now you're looking at keeping Avery and Anais?
Yeah, and Johnny Wilson. That's the problem. So
see, now you have Avery Williams, Anais Smith, and Johnny Wilson outside of your top. I mean that John, that doesn't sound good to me. I'm not a fan of that at all.
At receiver, no, it doesn't. But they're not there for that role. That's the point of, and that's how you handle the practice squad. So you can do different things again. Right. And we're going to see if Terrace Marshall. He looked like he might have gotten some. I don't want to say it's significant, but I don't think it's going to be a day injury. I think he's going to be out for a while. A lot of hype on Elijah Cooks, who's been great in recent days at camp. They're better receivers. Nobody's debating that. But again, they're never going to play unless AJ and Devontae get hurt. And obviously, A, you don't want that to happen. B, you can't build your team with that mindset. You can't legislate injuries, so you can't say, well, if AJ gets hurt, we need this guy. You have to build a 53-man roster to win a football game, and special teams is important.
Yeah, I get that.
Even though people don't pay that much attention to it.
Right. I feel like it's such a double-edged sword because it's like you're also trying to just create the best roster, where, if something does happen, and again, you can't legislate it, you're right about that, but, you're an odds guy, John. If you look at the odds across most NFL teams, some dudes are going to go down in the year. That's football, so I feel like to have those 3 guys at the back of the receiver room just feels dumb to me when you've had a camp talking about some of these players who finally we feel like we have maybe a decent backup who can play on the outside. We'll see what they end up doing. John, last question on that returner. Which of the 3, or I guess the 2, Anais and Avery Williams, which of those 2 has a better chance to do both? Because if you get the guy that can do both, and maybe neither of them can, if you get a guy that can do both, maybe that does open up one of those roster spots in the back, and you got to move on from one of them.
I think Anais, he does do both. He takes reps at kickoff return as well, and Avery hasn't yet. Now, he's done it in the past. He's punted, but I haven't seen it here. He's been a good punt returner in college. He was a good punt returner with Atlanta at stages in the NFL, but I haven't seen it here. Like, Anais takes reps. He's the first-team punt returner right now, and he takes reps at kickoff returner. So it seems like from their standpoint, they think Anais. And by the way, I would not keep Avery Williams. The reason I signed Avery Williams, if I'm Howie, is to do both. And if you can't do both, I don't think the value's there, because you can have a nice return kick. You can have Will Shipley return kicks, and you'll be fine. I don't need a kick returner.
Yeah, so
who's taking up a roster spot.
I agree. What would you do there then, John? Who would you keep and who would you move on from, and how would you do it? Because I more fall in your camp right now with what you just explained.
Yeah, I would not keep Avery unless they think he's going to be the punt returner as well, because I don't think he's going to help you at all on offense.
Yeah, right.
Now, Anais, he's got to play better. He's showing some signs. He's got more confidence. He's obviously quicker. He was hurt last year. Coming in, struggled with his confidence a little bit. So he's gotten a lot better, but and he's done some nice things in one-on-ones. He's going to be here, and he's at least a legitimate receiver. And by legitimate, I mean he can play the position. Like Avery can't play the position. they're bouncing him around in 2 NFL cities, D-back, running back,
Right.
He's not a real wide receiver. Obviously, he can line up there. I say that. Anybody can line up anywhere. Can you do it effectively?
Yeah, right.
So to me, that's one that's mystifying to me, that I don't see the value unless he's doing both roles. If he's doing both roles and you're saving a roster spot, I think that's tremendous value. But that hasn't manifested itself yet, to the point where, as I said, now we're not there for walkthroughs. Maybe he's doing it in walkthroughs,
right,
which are important to the Eagles, but they've certainly hidden it to this point when we're there.
We'll see what ends up happening with it. Johnny Mac. John, moving on just a little bit, getting off. We'll see what Michael Clay has to say about that. He's set to speak 9:40, right, John, this morning, right before practice at 10?
Yeah,
Yeah,
9:40-ish.
9:40-ish, yeah. So we'll see when he comes out. John, what else as we go into day 6 here of practice for this team? I brought up the injuries this morning, John, and I don't think it's a big deal. I mean, there's a lot worse injuries you're seeing around the league right now, but it's a little bit of a thing right now for the Birds. I mean, Terrace Marshall went down. Danny Gray got cut. Nolan Smith with the concussion a little bit. Devontae Smith was out for a couple practices. So there's a little bit of something there, and no concern for that on that for you, right? On the injury front?
No. That's the modern NFL. Your key players, if they have a hangnail, you're not going to practice them. So, I mean, that's where you are with guys like Jalen Carter, who hasn't done any team drills to this point, but he is practicing. He is back doing individual stuff. Devontae Smith, had some back tightness. And they were forced to cut Danny Gray because he couldn't practice, and you need bodies because at some point, Terrace Marshall goes down. So I'd be shocked if he practiced today. So if you still had Danny Gray, he's out. If Devontae's out, that's 3 receivers.
Right.
And all of a sudden, AJ's got to take all these extra reps, and you're like, yeah, you don't want that. So, but there's nothing serious, and you've seen around the league already, torn ACLs, torn Achilles. The Eagles continue to have a sort of nice run. I don't want to call it luck because they work hard, and the training staff and the sports science staff, but there is an element of luck.
Absolutely. Yep. Absolutely.
And they've been very lucky for an extended period, to the point you're looking up at the sky and waiting for the shoe to drop.
Yep, no doubt. No doubt about it. Johnny Mac, good stuff there. John, let's move into that safety spot. First thing I'm looking for today, John, is Andrew McCuba on the field. I think he better get out there quick, John, if they're going to keep having that battle, or if he is going to be positioned to be a starter in week 1. I know it's still early. It's July 31st today. It's not even August yet, but that guy's got to be on the field, John. That's the first thing I'm watching is Andrew McCuba. Is he out on the field today?
Yeah, I mean, obviously, the quicker he gets back, the better. He does need to play in the preseason. So if he misses a preseason game, that's going to affect him rapidly when you're talking about week 1. But I don't think week 1 is that important, to be honest. As you saw last year, I think people should have seen with Cooper DeJean. I know people get hyper focused on week 1, sort of like it's sort of like the opposite of the Super Bowl. Like, everybody's so worried about week 1. It's not that big of a deal. Now, you want him to get reps, and that's what'll set him back.
Right.
If he can't play in the preseason. But again, if he turns into a good player in week 3 or week 4, is it that big of a deal? I don't think so, but I get why people are hyper focused. If he's not playing in the preseason, he's probably not going to start week 1.
Right. I don't know if I got as much confidence if he came in week 4. He'd be what Cooper DeJean became last year as a second.
I'm not saying the type of player. I'm not saying the type of player. I'm saying, the goal isn't to be there necessarily week 1 at all costs.
Right. It's to be.
Yeah. So I'm not betting on him being an impactful player like Cooper DeJean, and I still think there's a chance that Cooper's playing safety. I don't know how they're getting there, but I still think there's an opportunity that happens. There's a lot of moving parts, and Vic's just trying to figure out the best 5 guys to have on the field in nickel. And the luxury he has is he's got one guy who can play every position,
Right.
and that's a luxury because there aren't many guys who can do that.
How many corners you think they're going to keep, and then how many safeties you think they're going to keep?
I guess would be 6 corners and 4 safeties. They'll go heavier at corner because
Right.
they have more, I think, more NFL ready players at corner than safety.
They kept what, 5 last year, John? 5 corners last year?
Well, it dissipated. They kept Eli Riggs, so I don't have the roster in front of me from last year, but that's always a moving target. And that'll change from drastically. Like I always bring up how they kept 2 tight ends at the initial 53, but eventually the 3rd tight end was brought up because you have to do it eventually, and that'll move back and forth. But for what's assembled here now, I think there's more guys because Quinyon Mitchell's going to be here. Kaylee Ringo's going to be here. Dory Jackson's going to be here. Mac McWilliams is going to be here. Eli Riggs is a guy nobody talks about.
Yeah, I was going to say, there's a comment in the chat right now. Has he done anything? I haven't heard a peep on him, and I'm with him. We haven't talked about him once, John.
Yeah, we've talked about him a little bit. He's playing pretty well. And I think he's, when you hear Vic talk about Dory Jackson the other day, I think Eli Riggs is probably, they kept him around for a reason.
Right.
Now, at some point, it's hard to keep a guy, because Eli's a guy they've kept who doesn't really help that much on special teams. And he's probably not going to turn into a great special teams player this year. So at some point, if he's not going to be able to play at all, you got to move on. But I still think he's going to be here. So, and safety, they're just, unless Maxon Hook or somebody like that comes on as an undrafted free agent, it's a position they're not nearly as deep at as some other positions. And Cooper's versatility, remember, helps.
Right.
So when you have Cooper who can play safety, you don't really need to keep an extra safety.
Yeah, that gives you a lot. That gives you a lot of flexibility for Vic Fangio. We'll see what they end up doing. That's going to be an interesting one to keep an eye on back there. John, keep moving along, man. The 2 guys who I think have really, and we talked about them extensively, but the 2 guys who've really stolen the show so far are Quinyon Mitchell and Moro Ojomo, and I think that's 2 positive signs from the defensive side of the ball, where you do have question marks on the defensive side after all the losses, and while that's all great, I was re-listening to the Vic Fangio press conference, John, and I wanted to ask you, because you brought it up, and I think it maybe took me an extra second to figure out where you were going with it, but do you think Vic Fangio is upset with what talent he has on his side of the ball coming into the year this year after getting the first overall defense in the NFL last year?
I don't think he's upset. Obviously, as a coach, it's not his job, which is kind of what I think a lot of people think, like, Vic goes into Howie's office and says, "Oh, give me this guy." It doesn't work like that. And he knows it's not his job when it comes to personnel. That's Howie's job. But, obviously Howie's a very good GM, and he tries to get players that Vic would like. And there's certain instances, Bryce Huff being the most notable, that has already failed. And there was little sort of hints But I thought the Adoree Jackson stuff was a little bit overblown because he said some nice things about him as well. But it didn't seem like that was a guy that, and he flat out said, I didn't watch much tape of him at all. That's a guy Howie wanted. And the Eagles have wanted Adoree Jackson for years. So Howie's been on that wagon for a long time. And he's wanted that particular player. And he finally got him later in his career. But it's, you know, not necessarily a guy Vic would have picked first. I think that's fair to say. Sidney Brown's probably in that category. He was drafted before Vic was here. I think it's fair to say that. But no, I mean, he's been around for 40 years. He knows how this works. You're never going to get everything you want. If we're up to him, he'd love to have Milt Williams and Josh Sweat back and Darius Slay. I'm not sure about CJ, but from a football perspective, he'd like to have CJ back. I mean, you always want good players. So, but he knows better than anybody because he's been around so long. He knows it's not possible. So, you know, your job as a coach, and what they all say, all the good ones at least, is your job is to get what you do have
right.
a little bit farther than they would go on their own.
Right.
And, you know, that's those are shifting sands every year, how much talent you have.
Yeah, no,
Which
I
is
get
why
it.
the same coach doesn't win every year.
Yeah, right. No, I get that. I just don't want them to, you know, it's almost like you take him for granted, not take him for granted, but you know he's going to turn garbage to gold more than most, John. You know what I mean? So you come in and you load the offense up and you make no changes on that side of the ball.
But yeah, I mean, that's a good thing about Vic.
Damn, we're losing John. Oh, I lost you there, John. If you can just repeat that.
Well, yeah, I'm going over.
Yeah, you're going over the bridge. You're going over the bridge. I'm not going to get you till you're over.
So, but hopefully I'm getting over. So hopefully you got me back.
Yeah, I got you back now.
But yeah, I mean, as far as Vic, yeah, I mean, I think he understands it, and you know, his goal is just to get the players he does have just to a higher point than they would go, and he's going to be better at it than most of the other defensive coordinators. So that's the positive part from the Eagles' perspective. He's going to make the most out of what he has. Question is, how good is what he has? You know, and there's some questions at corner and safety and especially edge rusher. That to me remains the biggest question.
Yep, John. I mentioned Quinyon and Moro Jomo. Fair to say those are the two clear winners so far in camp. I know there's probably some other guys you might throw into that, but is it still pretty clear those two are having great camps early right now?
Yeah, I think, and when you factor in what he has to deal with every day, I think Quinyon Mitchell has been probably number one. Moro's been great, but again, we put the caveat on it. He gets to go against Tyler Steen, who's, you know, and Jeff Stoutland mentioned he had a good day, so he's improving. But, you know, he's had some tough goes of it. And as we mentioned, the Eagles don't flip their defensive tackles that much, so, you know, poor Ty Robinson and guys like that have been going against Landon and Jordan, and, you know, Moro's feasting. But I do think, and BLG said it yesterday on the show as well, I do think he's a good player. But he's looked like a superstar. And I don't think he's a superstar. So I think part of it is who he's going against every day. But I
Which
do
could
think,
bring up a separate concern.
Well, that's what I'm saying. I said that a number of times. You have to, the context of, like, when you're a cornerback and you're going against A.J. Brown every day and Devontae
Yeah, right.
Smith,
it's not going to be as good. Yeah.
Yeah, and Quinyon has been good against that versus Moro, who's been really, really good, but the competition he's going against is not all pro level like Jalen Hunt is going against, for instance, if you want to keep it to the defensive front. So I do think people fail to add that context in, and I try to do it, but sometimes it goes
well, John, we got to repeat ourselves a lot. That's just the nature of the business. All right, John, final thoughts here before I let you run. Michael Clay coming up 9:40, day number 6 on the practice field. What's first couple things that you're watching today? Take me inside the mind of Johnny Mack and your final thoughts here as I let you run and you can get down there to the NovaCare complex.
Well, I think number one offensively is a clean practice because they were just a mess when we last saw them with the officials. The NFL officials are here this week, and I think Jeff McLean had 8 offensive penalties. I had 5, but I was doing some different things. I was looking at some one-on-ones with the running backs and the linebackers, so I didn't see every team play. He had 8 penalties on the offense in one practice, which I'm sure they got reamed out by the coaching staff because it was sloppy from their standpoint. So number one, they got to get back from that. And it seems like every year you have one of those practices where there's just flags all over the place and pre-snap penalties, and it's part of getting the timing back and things like that. I'm sure they'll clean it up, but they got to clean it up quickly because that was, of all the, and I say those practices happen every year, but not to that degree. It's very rare when you see that many penalties and that many pre-snap penalties. So that was not a positive sign, and that's got to get back. That's number one. Defensively, I don't think this is a reboot. I always talk about reboot days. The Eagles had a walkthrough, so I think a lot of people think, well, they didn't practice yesterday, so maybe there's some changes today. Well, in their mind, they did. The off day is Saturday this week, so that would be the reboot day. But I don't think you're going to see a lot of rebooting anyway, from the standpoint of until the first preseason game is over, just it's so early. I don't think you're going to make any drastic changes until after that, and then you might see some changes when it comes to the depth chart and see if guys are starting to distance themselves a little bit.
Yeah. Johnny Mack, great stuff today, brother. We'll be listening to your questions today at the press conferences. We'll see what players speak. I'm kind of hoping Adoree gets to the podium just because I want to hear what he has to say.
Well, Adoree just spoke the other day, so that's the timing, unfortunately. In the old days, we could just pull them and say, "Hey, Vic said this," but can't do that now.
Can't do that anymore. Yeah.
All
right, J Mac, great stuff, man. We will talk to you tonight on a Birds 365 nightcap edition. Great work so far today, brother. Enjoy the practice. Take it all in, and we'll be looking forward to talking to you this evening.
All right, thanks all.
All right, thanks, Johnny Mack. There's Johnny Mack, John McMullen, joining us right here on a Football 24/7 morning edition. Good stuff listening to John as we roll right along in training camp. Always nice to hear John kind of bring a sense of realism, a sense of objectivity to the conversation. So good stuff there.